Shout out to Craig J for sending me the story coming out of Wisconsin. And this story kind of caught me by surprise just reading the title. But to be honest, I'm not even upset at the title and what you're about to hear me read. So this man's name is Brian Luitz the second. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce his last name, spelled Luitze, the second. And this guy right here beat his grandfather to death with a hammer because of something that happened way before he was even born. Now you're probably wondering, what did this guy do to make his grandson beat him to death with a hammer before he was from an incident that happened before he was even born? Well, he found out that his grandfather was a sex offender, and apparently he felt some type of way about that and decided to go to his grandfather, who by the way was 70, and take a hammer and beat him to death with it. Let's get into it. A Wisconsin man is charged with bludgeoning his grandfather to death, allegedly in anger over a crime that occurred before he was even born. Charles Luitz, age 70, was found dead inside his home in August with a hammer still embedded in his face, according to the Kenosha News. Luitz was a registered sex offender as a result of a 1991 conviction, and his grandson, Brian, aged 25, allegedly told a relative he was thinking about taking him out as retribution for his past crimes. Prosecutors said they found a backpack at the suspect's home that was stained with the victim's blood. It was a particularly chilling homicide, Assistant District Attorney Andrew Burgoyne said at a hearing last week. The mechanism of murder here with the hammer blows bludgeoning the victim in the middle of the face is noteworthy. Before he is alleged to have beaten his grandfather to death with a hammer, Brian Luitz II spoke to a relative about the grandfather's past. How can you forgive him? Luitz asked, according to a criminal complaint filed Friday. Luitz told the relative he could not forgive someone like that and said he was considering taking him out, the complaint states. Jesus, he paid his debts to society and has been a long time, the relative said he told Luitz. It's been a long time and it is over. Brian, age 25 of Racine, was charged Friday with first-degree intentional homicide for the August 15th bludgeoning death of Charles Luitz, age 70, of Summers. He is alleged to have beaten Luitz to death, leaving behind a gruesome scene discovered by a neighbor who went looking for Charles in his Sheridan Road home after she was unable to reach him. The first deputy who arrived was a neighbor who called 911, reported that when he walked into Charles's bedroom, he found the elderly man lying on his bed, blood splattered on the walls. A hammer was still embedded in Charles's face, the handle pointed toward the door, the center of his face crushed inward. It's a particularly chilling homicide, Assistant District Attorney Andrew Burgoyne said in Kenosha County Circuit Court Friday. The mechanism of murder here with the hammer blows bludgeoning the victim in the middle of the face is noteworthy. Although in recent years he had lived a quiet life at his Summers home, gardening and sharing produce with neighbors, Charles Luitz had been convicted of child sexual assault in 1991 and was registered as a sex offender. Luitz was not a victim in that case. He was born after his grandfather's conviction and had not seen his grandfather since he was a child. But according to the criminal complaint, he had been talking to a relative and a friend about the man and his anger about his grandfather's past actions. Luitz's friend told investigators in August that Luitz had been very upset recently, and he talked about what Charles did and told her how he hated Charles. According to the complaint, in the days before Charles died, Luitz went to Charles's home to see him, pretending to be a census worker. His grandfather did not recognize him, Luitz told his relatives. But the visit did spook Charles, who told a friend who spoke to investigators that Charles had talked to him while they were walking together on the lakefront on August 13th about a person who came to his home claiming to be a census worker, but who did not have identification. Charles told the friend that, the visit left him upset and afraid. No one saw Charles after August 13th. His body was found in his home on August 15th, the complaint states. Although Luitz was charged Friday, he has been in custody at Kenosha County Jail since August 17th on a probation hold for a previous conviction. At his initial court appearance Friday, Burgoyne, the prosecutor, said the case against Luitz is strong, including the discovery of a backpack at Luitz's home that was stained with blood matched by DNA to Charles. Burgoyne said the statements made to a relative show a level of premeditation. Defense attorney Hillary Edwards said the case is not as strong as it appears, saying that multiple people had access to the backpack, including others that had motive here. Edwards said that there's also contradictory statements from witnesses about the timeline of when Charles was last seen alive. Court Commissioner Larry Keating called the allegations disturbing and grisly, setting Louise's bond at $1 million. Louise is next expected to appear in court for a preliminary hearing on Wednesday. Now, what's interesting about this whole story is that this guy killed his own grandfather. Now, they said that he really never seen his grandfather since he was a kid, so he really didn't know him. That's why the grandfather did not recognize who he was. So you could tell they probably had a very distant relationship, which probably also means that the I don't know which side of the family he's on. I don't know if this is on his dad's side or his mother's side, but they kept him. It seems that he was kept away from his grandfather, considering that he was born just a couple of years or a few years after his conviction for what he did. So they probably didn't want the grandson, him, to be anywhere near him. And he probably couldn't have any children around him anyway, because, the guy sexually assaulted a child. So they can't be around kids, whether they're relatives or not. And he probably, he heard those stories and he got upset, or he probably, he's heard so many stories in the past about, kids being sexually assaulted. And, when it comes to that, those children are innocent. Like, those children do nothing to deserve that kind of treatment. And then I think it burned him up even more to learn that it was his grandfather, his own flesh and blood, that engaged in this activity. I have a feeling that if it wasn't his grandfather, if he found that it was another relative that he could have gotten close to, he would have did the same thing to them too. But that just shows the type of person that he is. He can't stand those type of people that would violate children. The fact that he reached back years, in just a few years before he was born, to gather that information in order to make his move. I said that's what makes this interesting, because like I said, it wasn't a complete stranger that he did this to. This was a relative that he did this to. Someone that was related to him by blood, but even though he really didn't know this man, because they said that he didn't grow up with him. So in a way, he was still a complete stranger to him. After all, they said that the grandfather did not recognize him, according to his account. And he probably preferred it to be that way. It was easier for him to get in. But he went in. They said that the hammer was still stuck in his face, and the handle was sticking outwards toward the door, and his face was crushed inward. So he went in on him. And because he's younger and he can maneuver faster, it was not a hard task for him to do that. It was not hard for him to do that against somebody who was 70 years of age. Now imagine when he gets to jail, because he most likely he's definitely going to serve jail time. Imagine he goes to jail and they ask him what he's in for. He said, because I killed a sex offender of a child, and the person was my grandfather. They probably be looking at him like they scared. They would probably be scared of him, because not only did he do something like that, but he killed family. He killed a family member. They probably like, oh well, I'm not going to try to get on this guy's bad side. And if they ask him how he did it, and he describes the details, they really not going to want to be anywhere near this guy. And if they're lucky, if they're fortunate, they better keep him away from any other person in that prison that has engaged in the same type of crime that his grandfather did, because they'll be in close proximity, and who knows what he might do to that person. But then again, if something happens to them because of what they did, it's oh well, because in my opinion, it's no redeeming of any, like when you do something like that, they can, put you as a sex offender. You can go ahead and live your life and everything like that. But that still doesn't take away the fact that you violated a child, because at the end of the day, you might be able to move on from that because you was an adult. So it doesn't take you long to move on. But when you do that to a minor, it's going to take years for them to get over that, if they ever do. Remember, I just did a story what happened in the UK where you had this 21-year-old who violated this minor girl, and he didn't get like any jail time. He's going to be able to move on from this for the rest of his life, because he literally skated right on out of that courtroom. I said to myself, why did they even have a case? Why did they even have a trial if that's what you were going to do? But I feel indifferent. Like I said, I feel kind of indifferent about this one, because like I said, I never heard a story quite like this before. I mean, of course, I've heard stories, come across stories where people, mess with kids. But the fact that the grandson was the one that took care of business, He was like, this may have happened all these years ago. It may have happened before I was born, but it's because of you that I probably, you know what another thing is? He probably is more upset also with his grandfather because of what he did to a child, that he was not able to have a decent relationship with his grandfather because of him being a child. He couldn't have children around him. So he was probably mad about that, the break in a relationship that he could have had with his grandfather that he couldn't have because his grandfather was a sick perv. So probably all of that, plus the fact of the act in which he committed, as disgusting as it is, all boiled up in him, and that rage came out in the form of some hammer swings. But y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments.